Hello, welcome to Cedar Creek Homestead. Hope you're having a wonderful day. It's a really nice spring morning out here today, and snakes and ticks and chiggers and all that stuff have not got started much yet. And I was going to take you on a tour of an old goat dairy and what this was like when I was a kid. And I'm going to show you what some of this, it's old buildings and stuff, might not interest you. But when I was a kid, across from our home where we lived out here, where I still live now, this used to be a goat dairy in here. And so I was raised up around goats, and I'd come over here and help them milk the goats, and I'd help feed them and unload feed and take care of things over here. And the people who had this, they were some of the best Christian people that ever drank water. They were some of the best people I've ever met in my life. They've gone on to be with the Lord. But there was two families lived up here. They weren't kin, but you would have thought they were. But they raised a big garden in behind here too. And I'd come over, they're like grandparents to us. And but both families worked together with the goat dairy. And oh, they probably had at the peak, I'd say 20 or 30 goats that they were milking. But they would most usually just give the goat milk away. It was a good cure for ulcers and things like that, they believed. And this man's wife had got real sick with ulcers, and they were going to have to do surgery on her. And someone told them to give her goat's milk. And she drank, they went somewhere and got some goat's milk, and she drank that, and she got to being cured up and doing well. And so after that, they were sold on goat's milk. If you had any kind of stomach troubles, problems, whatever, they were like, drink goat's milk, drink goat's milk. And so they gave it away to a lot of people with ulcers and things. Whether that really works, I don't know. I have no reason to doubt their word. But anyway, I'll show you this old building here and take you a little walk through here. This building here is where they used to keep their feed at. And this old house here is probably 100-year-old, probably as old as the state of Oklahoma since statehood. But there's a lot of people still alive around here that's in their 70s and 80s that at one time lived in this old house. And these people sometime had a camp meeting up the road here, and there's one of their old signs from when I was a boy. They would have a Pentecostal church camp meeting up here in a barn, and they would have it once a year. And I mean, you talk about some good old church. But anyway, they kept the feed in here. They'd keep this door locked. I'm not going to go in the building. It's getting so bad now and falling down. But they had some rabbits, a little place right over here. They kept rabbits, and in here was their feed room. And I'd help unload feed and stuff, and we'd come in here and work around here. And then they had their pens and stuff over here, and this all has gotten grown up over the years. And right here's a old water can. You remember when they used to have these old metal water cans? Don't tell them how old that thing is. But hope you can hear me over the wind. For a while, these people had a camper they lived in, a travel trailer over here, and they built them a house up the road. But there's an old cellar, storm shelter, right back there by them Easter lilies that are blooming. And anyway, I came over here many a time, and this place brings back memories. It certainly does not look like now like it did back in the day, but nothing does. I don't look like I did back during the day. But anyway, they had a few cows and stuff too. They had a milk cow, but they milked it at a different, up there by their home. This is up through yonder was their home, but they had a lane down through here, and it turned and went back that way. And they have a panel up halfway down, so the cows couldn't come in here, but the goats could. And in the mornings, when it was milking time, the goats would be in here and ready to go. And they'd be ready to milk. And The actually at night most of the time they kept them locked in this little lot. Someone's tore this building down here a while back for the metal, but there was another little building like these sheds right here, and they had this pen back here. They would put the goats in when it was time for them to have babies, because there's like 300 or 400 acres back in here, and those goats would go and graze and stuff. And in the evenings, when the guy that usually milked in the evenings, he worked off for an electric plant, and he would come home and come in here and milk, where the goats would be in here waiting on him. And he had an old dog named Queenie, and that dog stayed with the goats. He had raised her here with the goats, and she was their protector. If a stranger come up here, she'd really get at you. They never lost any to predators or nothing, none of the babies or anything. She stayed right here with them, but she would make sure they were up here, and they'd be ready when he got home from work. And over the years, all these sprouts have grown up, but that old man used to keep this whole little lot area here clean, and he would sweep this whole thing. He'd sweep the poop off, and it'd just be bare dirt in here. Very, very clean dairy. But anyway, this little old building used to be here. They would put, if it's colder weather, or sometimes we'd get snowstorms and stuff in March, they would lock a mama goat with babies in this little old shed right here. And then this might bore you to death or whatever. I'm just going to walk you through some of the things. But this is where they milked the goats at. And the goats would come up this little walkway, and he'd have a little feed trough up there. He didn't have a stanchion or nothing to lock them in. And he called their name. They knew their name. And they would come up this little walkway. Someone's put a bottle of bug spray up there for some reason, but I don't know why you'd need it out here with all the... I'm sure they had lots of bugs. I never remember him using any kind of spray. But anyway, the goat would come up here, and up here's a little shelf he had, and he'd keep a lantern. And if he come in the wintertime, it'd be dark when he come to milk, and he'd have to have a lantern. You'd always see a lantern or two lit up over here. But he would stand right there, milk the goat. And right here's a little pen, had a little door here, homemade type setup. There, it looks like someone tried to add another door since I was a kid. It used to have this short door, must have fell off or whatever. You can see someone just took a post there, but that's the same old post with that same old leg screw in it. And this little latch, you'd come around here and hook in there, latch out around that. But he would put like a mama goat that had babies or something in there sometimes, or separate the babies from the mama, whatever he wanted to do there, needed to with the goats. And then in here was another little shed, and he'd sometimes lock a mama goat that had babies, might lock her up in there for a day or two until the babies got a little bit bigger, and or if you had a sick one or whatever. And in here was where they fed the goats. This long shed, they had mangers built. Someone's tore them out over the years, but a hay manger went down through here. There's another one of them silver coolers. You used to see them a lot when I was a kid. Now everything's plastic, but one of them Igloo brand coolers, it's silver. But anyway, it looks like this thing's tried to fall down over the years or something. Someone put a cable across there. But anyway, they had mangers in here, and they would put alfalfa hay down through here, and the goats could come in here and eat that alfalfa hay. And the goats are funny, but they would eat the stems, but they didn't eat very much of the leaves off the alfalfa. So the alfalfa leaves would fall down here. Well, in the springtime, my job would be to clean this out. I'd come over here, and my dad would take that those alfalfa leaves. I'd take a pitchfork and put it in a wheelbarrow it over to our house, and I'd keep on till I cleaned this whole thing out. And the gentleman who owned it, he appreciated it, because if not, it would have just built up and got really, really bad in here. But I'd clean this manger out and the underneath of it, and my dad would put it on the garden. And my dad used to grow the best tomatoes anywhere, and I think it's because of the goat manure and the alfalfa leaves. Really made the tomatoes really do good. My dad used to grow some of the best tomatoes. These people also would bring in their cows every once in a while, and they'd work them in here too during the day. They'd bring them down through this little old alleyway here, but they never did work the goats in this thing, but they'd bring them down here. And you can see it's been a long time, because this arm that raises up and down for your head gate, you can't raise it up no more because it's grown into a tree. But I can remember them. They'd usually raise at least a beef every year, and they'd sometimes have a few cows. They always had a dairy cow or two in here. But over the years, vines have grown up because nobody cares about this anymore. But I thought I'd just take you on I'll call it a antique dairy. Antique goat dairy. And here's an old feed trough. They had some pigs, and they kept over in this pen, and they had this old homemade, I think this was out of a hot water heater, this little trough, and they cut that out. I can't remember for sure, but I remember them feeding pigs over here. These folks had a, sure enough, they were homesteaders. Sorry, I'm probably making noise switching the camera around there. My wife gets after me for that noise, but this little handle thing on where my camera is, and my gloves sliding around it, it sounds like sandpaper sometimes and doesn't sound very well. But anyway, this is across the road from where I was born and raised, and we had many precious memories over here at this place, and they weren't any blood kin to me, but they might as well have been, because we were really close to these folks, and they lived up in their 80s. The little old lady that done this, like I say, they milked a cow. She did clear up till almost her death, and she made homemade butter, and churned her own butter with an old hand churn, and they were something else. Raised their own pork, their own beef, own chickens, turkeys. They were definitely homesteaders. In fact, if they were alive today and they were doing what they did back then, you want to talk about a YouTube channel, they would have been the YouTubers #1 channel on homesteading, because they sure had it down, and they were such good people. But they knew a lot of old home time remedies and things to do, and they'd been through a lot of rough times and stuff, and could tell you some stories about the Depression and things like that. But like I say, they've been gone now a number of years, but both families now have passed away, and we sure miss them. Now that I'm living back here, a lot of times I think about them and how they would have responded on certain things. But the little lady, there's a concrete slab here. You can't hardly see it anymore, except there's no grass growing up here. But they had them a little slab built, and had an old Airstream, one of those silver looking pull behind travel trailers. I mean, it was a nice one for that particular time, and they had that parked on this slab right here, and they lived here while they were building a home up there. They built a house right up the road here. Just to tell you a little bit more about those people, but it was earthquake, fireproof, tornado proof home. And when a tornado was coming, if we had a warning or a threat of bad weather, sometimes they'd call and say, y'all come on up to the house. But if it's anything very bad, we just went up to their home. All the neighbors around here would. It's a big old house made out of rock and concrete and steel, and it's supposed to have been earthquake, tornado proof and all that. But they had a home burn, and so they lived in this travel trailer temporary, and they decided to build a home that would never burn. And somehow he got plans for one. But she had the Easter lilies. She loved Easter lilies, our little neighbor lady, and they're still coming up. These are, I would say, at least 50-year-old. I believe they moved here and started homesteading this piece of property about the time I'd call it homestead, and they bought this little old place, but they started living here and taking care of this place. And they used to have a big garden spot in here, and the trees got grown up, and their grandson got a backhoe, and he kind of cleaned it back up. He was trying to get it back to the, but he ain't into gardening or nothing, but he was trying to get it back in. But they used to garden all this, and there wasn't any of them trees here then, except this old big huge, this tree right here. It was here when I was a kid, but these others were all out. It's just things have grown up. And then there was big old oak trees down through here. And I think one thing made this garden so good is part of the daytime it was shaded by these big oak trees, and it helped back in the day. Of course, it didn't get as hot, it didn't seem like back then like we have now. But anyhow, a little bit of history here and a little bit of story about a goat dairy. And I definitely don't think I'm any kind of goat expert, but now these folks that lived here, they were goat experts. They certainly knew how to raise, milk, and manage goats. And I'm sure they sold some goat milk, but they mostly did it to help people, and they thought that milk, goat milk, was very, very healthy at the time. Anyway, give you a little bit of history here of my my growing up. We lived right here in a house right here by where these old dog pens are on that concrete slab. We had a house set right here, and this slab where the grain bin is was my dad built onto our house. It was a little small house, and he built on, put a garage, he built on the other end there, and put a kitchen and a bedroom, and turned our kitchen in the old part into all living room. It's hard to believe we started out in such a small home, and even that home now would be considered very small, but there was 5 of us kids raised up here. And but anyhow, it's kind of neat and interesting how things change over the years. But this is where I started out, right here. This garden spot of mine where I raise a garden is same old spot. I disked it up the other day, and that little slab right over there is I cleaned it off. That used to be our wash house, and if you're familiar with what I'm talking about, used to, you usually didn't have your washer and dryer in the same home. They didn't come prepared that way, so my dad built that little building, and Mom kept the canned goods stored out there, and we had a washer and dryer, and even our water heater was out there in that shed. And then it was plumbed over to the house, and I don't know what the thinking is behind that, but anyway, when I was born, we had an outhouse out here. Now, we kept an outhouse for probably the first 10 years or so of my life here, but we had indoor plumbing, but we had an outhouse too, because we'd lose electricity, and when we'd lose electricity, our pump wouldn't work, and so you had to go out to the outhouse then. My dad was raised without running water until he was in high school, but and about to get married, well then they got running water. But anyway, hey, I appreciate you watching today. I've rambled on enough. Hope you enjoyed this little video. God bless you. We're gone.